Hi, Jen.
Hello.
I feel like we just have to, for perpetuity, do these cheesy hello.
I don't often have the energy when we record them, I will be honest, but we're doing this a little earlier in the day because when we normally record, we were both not feeling well, so we had to reschedule.
Oh, don't remind me.
You with the
Yeah,
migraine and me with the ear infection like a toddler.
yeah, good times. Yep.
Yeah,
But
so good.
here we are, ready to launch another episode. And I think we basically have this week and then next week, and we're going to take a little break and come back in 2023.
Yes.
Yes, which is wild that it's already 2023. I had the sleepover party that I've been talking about,
How
and
was that?
crazy, crazy.
I
So
bet.
fun. Everyone had a really good time, but um, the girls who fell asleep last say they saw 3:30 a.m.
Was Matilda one of them?
Yes, and they were up at 7:30.
Oh, that's lovely.
So yeah, good times.
Yeah, that sounds, I don't know, not so fun to me.
Yeah. And there were just, yeah, a lot of them. And there really just is this pitch that only girls under like 11 can reach. And
Yeah.
they like to all do this kind of squeal at the same time, like all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of that, but I don't think I've lost my hearing. So there's that. I've got that going for me.
I mean, that's huge
But
that you didn't lose your
it was
hearing.
noisy. It was noisy. All
Yeah,
good.
I bet.
Until next year when she's probably going to want to do it all over again.
And you're going to be like, no.
No, I know. We did like, we played Truth or Dare with like questions that I had vetted
Hmm.
already. Yeah, they like painted nails and we did a craft and it was all good.
Well, that's good. I think that sounds fun.
Yeah.
We're kind of all feeling healthy. Like, I will admit, I still am not 100%.
Hmm.
The plague definitely took over our house for a few weeks.
Yeah.
But we finally saw Wakanda Forever, which new Marvel movie. We have
Okay,
to go
because I
see
don't even know
that.
what you're talking about. All right.
It's the Black Panther sequel. And I had read that it was very griefy because I imagine that you know Chadwick Boseman, who played Black Panther. It was a big deal last year, last August. He died.
Yes.
So obviously, like, he was supposed to be in this movie. They had his character die at the beginning of the movie, and a lot of it is actually his sister and mother grieving, and like their process within this like universe and story and all of it,
Ah.
which was really interesting and really sad. And like I cried a few times and we left, and
Hmm.
like Logan was like, Mom, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I am. I go, I think that was really sad. Like, it still ended in like a positive Marvel way and all of that, but it was definitely interesting, like the levels of it. I think most movies had like, even the Marvel movies have a lot of different levels of trauma and things like that. But this one definitely did. Like, there was intergenerational trauma, there was grieving, there was loss. I don't know. It was really interesting to watch. I honestly think I enjoyed it more than they did. I think it wasn't inappropriate for them, but I just think a lot of it went over their head.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't seen it. We're not really like a Marvel family.
Yeah, no, but it was like the Marvel logo at the beginning of their movies. It usually shows like clips from past movies and like comic strip stuff. Like, when a movie company's logo goes up, and like sometimes it's like flash. What anyway?
Hmm.
It was all shots of Chadwick Boseman. So like even it was
Oh,
definitely very much an homage
yeah.
to him, which was amazing.
Yeah, it's nice that that they honored him in that way for sure.
Exactly, like because he was, it was just it was nice. It was a big deal, but it was nice, and I'm glad we got to see it. Normally, we're like opening weekend movie kind of goers when it comes to a big movie like that. We were all sick, so we couldn't do
I
that.
love how you're like, when it comes to a big movie like that, I'm like, I've never even heard of it.
I mean, I can say categorically that that was a big movie opening, despite you not hearing about it, but I more meant like movies that are big for us.
Well, I teach grade 5 and 6 or whatever. And I ask them, I guess, dumb questions sometimes. And I tell them, I'm like, I'm not cool, guys. I'm not cool. I'm like, I want to be cool. I want to know what you're talking about, but like, I'm not. So bear with me. And I hope that they appreciate it, that I like show interest in what they're doing. But they were like talking about following people on Spotify. I'm like, you can follow people on Spotify?
Oh,
And
Tisha.
like,
Yeah, you can.
yeah. I don't know. Apparently. So
I mean, you are also an Apple person, so you probably don't use Spotify.
correct. That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. But anyways, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I have many examples of stuff that I have said like that, in particular to like the grade 6 kids. And yeah, I think they just laugh at me. I'm just like, guys, I'm old. I'm not cool.
Logan has never mentioned anything to me, so I don't know. But this week is Black Friday for those shopping folks.
Yes.
And so I thought that we would offer a discount on our merch site.
Yes.
That I just put in there. So starting today, you can get 15% off our merch site just by shopping there until the 28th. So from November 23rd to November 28th, you can get 15% off everything on our merch site. So when you shop the merch site, it supports the podcast and you get some, arguably pretty cool stuff for gifting, for keeping, for any of it.
What I want to know is, I'm trying to look it up because I am going to ask you, what is your favorite item in the merch shop? Oh, man.
The Healing Is hoodie.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a really good one.
I really like that one.
Yeah. And I think the healing is messy, beautiful, chaotic, wonderful, painful, possible. You can get that on a mug, on a sticker, on a notebook.
Yeah.
Or on a hoodie. So yeah, I mean, that's got to be one of my faves too. And the trauma doesn't define me.
I like that t-shirt too.
I'm also just like, I'm a lover of the stickers.
The stickers are great too. I want all of them. We literally haven't ordered
I want
anything.
all the stickers. I want all the stickers and more.
Yes.
I still want a sticker that says like, it's not about the beans. And
it's not
more.
about the beans. Yes. We have to do that.
I just want all the stickers. I want all the stickers.
I know. If you have a favorite quote from the show, from like something that was said, email it to us or DM us or whatever so that we know. And maybe it'll be a sticker. Maybe we'll make more stickers. I don't know. We'll see. It depends how much I feel I need to procrastinate from whether or not I will sit there and design something.
Well, I'm avoiding doing something.
That's essentially when that stuff happens in my world. But this week we are releasing Kareema's episode.
Yes. So sweet.
She's so sweet.
She was such a sweetheart.
Yeah. I feel like there are some similarities between Kareema's story and Anessa's, but they're still like quite different.
That's just the way it is, right? And like the more we tell these stories, we do sometimes see these sort of common threads throughout them. And yet every story is so unique.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I hope that our guests enjoy listening to Kareema as much as they enjoyed listening to Anessa.
And if you haven't listened to Anessa yet, go back and do that.
Yeah, for sure. And Kareema's episode is the 4th episode in our Bad Boyfriend month.
I don't think we realized when we picked November for this that it was a 5 Wednesday month, but
we did not. Yeah. So we're working on an episode for next week.
Yeah. It'll be the last one in the Bad Boyfriend month. So we hope you've enjoyed this little series. If you have ideas for like theme kind of months, we would love to hear them. It's always fun when we realize we have either episodes recorded or booked that work together in this way.
Yeah, for sure. Because we've done a body acceptance month before. We did a month focused on motherhood.
Yeah.
And now we're doing this Bad Boyfriend month. And it's kind of fun. Just switch things up a little.
I like
it.
Yeah,
hope to do some more theme months. Enjoy the episode, guys.
Hi, and welcome back to the Now What Pod. I'm Jen.
And I'm Tisha. Thank you so much for joining us again today. We are going to be talking with Kareema, who is joining us from DC. She works for a nonprofit organization, and she's also a mother, and she spends her free time making TikTok content, which is how I discovered her and asked her to be on the show, and just hanging out with her friends and engaging in self-care. So we're going to talk about all of that, and she's going to share a little bit of her story with us today. So thank you, Kareema, for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. We're excited. So I found you on TikTok, I guess. We get guests two ways. One way is people just apply to be on the show, which we have an application on our website, on our Instagram, whatever. So people sometimes just apply because they want to be on. And then other times we reach out to people because we're looking for certain types of stories. Mm-hmm. And we really want to make sure that we're sharing diverse voices. So it's important to Jen and I that we're not just sharing like the white Christian middle class perspective, but that we're getting people from all backgrounds and cultures. So sometimes we have to go digging to find people.
Because we're very white and very middle-aged.
I know.
You guys are funny.
So that tends to be like a majority of our applications. We're like, no, come on.
Let's find other people.
Well, I love that. I love that you guys want to diversify the pool, you know, who you guys speak with.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. It's not just, I don't know. You also don't want to speak into a vacuum.
Yeah.
And I feel like we almost, by having this platform and having it mostly being people like us who listen, in some ways it almost feels like more of a like desire or responsibility, because you can expose somebody who might not be aware or care about a story that's different from their own, or lived experience that's different, that, you know, we can offer that, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of sharing stories, just that people can connect with each other and learn about each other. And like, it really does have the power to bring people together. So anyways, here we are with you. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and where your story begins?
So a little bit about myself. I feel like that's such a hard question to answer. I don't know why, but I'm 26, so I'm fairly young, but I feel like I kind of had to develop fast due to just like my experiences. I think getting married so young definitely shaped me in a lot of my values and how I kind of navigate throughout life. So I do feel like that's why I am where I am today, and I have the things I have because I had to kind of, you know, rush through that process of maturing. But I would say I'm a very different person than I was years. I've changed a lot. And I would say at this point in life, I feel like I really do know myself. I definitely value myself. I value healing, development, all of that, on top of just like, you know, me being the type of responsible adult that I am and mother. And I just try to pour into myself and my son as much as possible. So, and in terms of where things started, you know, I do think getting married at 18 definitely shaped a lot. I'm not going to say it was like the worst decision ever, but it definitely changed the trajectory of my life as a whole. I'm 100% sure my life would have been different if I didn't get married young. But I wouldn't say nothing good came out of it. But I just want to say that I think it was just also the circumstances at that time. Like, it was kind of encouraged to get married so young in the religious community I was part of back then. So I thought I was really doing, you know, the right thing.
And were your parents were encouraging you to get married as well?
So actually, no. I was part of like a really strict Muslim community after I graduated high school. So I was born into a Muslim family. My mom is religious, but I would say she's like super strict. And my dad at the time wasn't religious. But I don't know why, like at that time, I just was on like this super strict religious spurt. I really wasn't raised that way. But at that time when I graduated high school, I just was engulfed in a community. It was almost like you can't be a good Muslim woman if you're not married. It was tied hand in hand. But, you know, looking back, that doesn't really make sense.
It's interesting. I feel like the more common stories you hear of people that grow up in really strict religious families, like rebelling after the fact, like when probably around the same age. And then here you are not growing up very devout or religious and then reverting back into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also makes sense to me that those things happen like around that same age where you're looking for your identity and you're looking for, you know, your community and you're trying to find your people. And then you find this place where you're accepted. And in that case, it was a religious community for you. I think like when we're young, we're just trying to figure out who we are and figure out where we belong.
No, I agree. I think that's a really good point. And I do think that has a lot to do with why I was so devout. Because again, I was not really raised that way. I'm not going to say like I wasn't raised like with any Muslim values, but I was not raised devoutly at all. But I do think it had a lot to do with me just being in that transition period of learning where I belong. And I'm also biracial. So I think that kind of was a factor as well, because I found myself trying to identify with my Arab side a little bit more when I wasn't always connected to that side. So I think it was just a lot of factors during that time period.
Yeah. So how did you meet your husband? And was he also a teenager?
He was a teenager. So he was 19, I was 18.
Okay.
So yeah, we were young. We didn't know anything. We met at the mosque. For those of you, I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but that's like basically where like a Muslim church, I guess you would. Yeah. So that's
place of worship.
Yeah, place of worship. Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's where we met.
And you started dating right away? Like, were you friends? Did you have common friends? Were there like mixers? How did it work? Since they clearly want you kind of married young.
Yeah, it was like a mixer. And I met him. And I don't know, I think about that day. I don't know. I felt like, okay, he seems like a nice person. He was young. And I don't know, I just was like, okay, maybe we both want the same things. Because he seemed like he was looking for a good Muslim wife. And I knew I just was looking for a good Muslim man. I didn't think about anything else. I wasn't thinking about money. I wasn't thinking about anything. That was
because you were 18.
And in my mind, I thought if he's a good Muslim man, of course
everything will work out.
Like, why wouldn't it? Which is something I think a lot of Muslim women overall, whether they have this identical experience with me or not, they do believe that as well. They think if they're a good Muslim, then everything else will fall in line. But that's not the case. You need to be able to relate to that person as well.
I think when you're 18, though, it seems that simple, even if you're not speaking in those terms, but we're in love.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Why do we need anything else? Everything else will work out. Like, they're a good person. I'm a good person. You know, brain is still freaking forming.
Yeah. I agree. That's why I say that all the time. Like at 18 and 19, we did not know anything at that time. So we were just kind of going on a whim.
I mean, there's studies now that say even for you at 26, things are still kind of like getting into place and everything. Yeah.
I believe it.
I mean, I believe it, and having lived it, like, I believe it. I think it's still happening.
I was just going to say, I don't know, it might still be coming into place for me now. And
20 years later, it's still happening.
So how long between when you met him to when you married or decided to marry?
It's going to sound crazy.
All right. I'm ready for it.
3 months.
3 months. From the time that you met till you were actually married or till you were engaged?
So we got married and moved in together.
3 months. That's fast.
Yeah, it is. Which is kind of common, though, again, for like people in those type of communities. I'm not saying not everyone, but I will say
it's not unheard of.
Yeah, it's not unheard of.
So what was going on with your folks? Were you living at home?
I was living at home. So my father was not happy about it. I mean, he thought it would be good for me to get married young, but just not to him. He never really thought it was a good idea. But I thought, in my mind, he was just kind of being like, what's the word? Biased towards him because he wasn't Arab. So in my mind, I justified it as that, even though he told me other reasons why he didn't think it was good. But I feel like I was just making in myself, I was just justifying it. He doesn't know what he's talking about. This can't be wrong, you know? So, and then my mom, I feel like she was just kind of like, if it makes you happy, I don't know, but which wasn't really the best advice, but.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a brother. I feel like he was kind of like the same as my mom, where he was just like, if it makes you happy.
I mean, I could see from your mom's perspective potentially, like if your dad is so against it, not wanting to lose the relationship with you or cut ties by having a really strong opinion.
Yeah.
I could see maybe feeling that, like, it's that whole good cop, bad cop kind of thing. If you're both bad cop, then she's going to marry this guy and leave us, and we're never going to see her. As a parent, I would worry about that.
That's a good point. I think also just that's my mom's kind of personality overall, though, towards a lot of stuff.
Right.
I think she's definitely more so like, like just whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. And sometimes parents also think like we have to figure things out on our own. So sometimes their parents are like, okay, if it makes you happy, because she's probably not going to be able to stop you.
No, I'm very hard-headed.
So she could kick up a fuss and tell you she hates him, but you probably still go through with it and then just be upset with her for trying to stop it.
Yeah.
It's a tough position, I think, to be in too as a parent. And if you seemed happy, then, let's hope for the best.
Right.
So you did get married.
And I would say that too. I think you said something about she would maybe think I would be upset, but I would say it definitely caused a rift in me and my father's.
I see it even with my own parents, and I don't have my husband, but I see that, like, you try to, as a couple with a child, you try to balance it out, and as you get older and more independent, you getting married is like you leaving the family, and so as the mom, you don't want your child to leave and not want to come back even for visits or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So what about your brother too? He was just kind of like, I mean,
so
whatever,
my so my brother, he actually was he was also in like a strict community as well. So I feel like for him, it was also like, well, you're doing
the right thing.
Yeah.
So did you go to the same mosque as your brother?
At one point I did, but eventually I didn't. But it was still kind of the same concept. It's not too many like mosques in the DMV area, so they're all kind of connected in a way.
That makes sense. So you did get married?
Yes, I did.
And what were those kind of early days like? Like, you're 18, probably never lived on your own before?
No.
And now you're married?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, as crazy as this sounds, I feel like I knew, so we were married 4 years, but I feel like within that first 6 months, I knew that something wasn't right. But I feel like all I heard was be patient. And that's all I kept hearing throughout the whole time was be patient, be patient, be patient. Everything is be patient. But eventually it was just like, I can't, but I feel like I knew in the beginning something wasn't right.
Something wasn't right. What were some of your clues, if you don't mind sharing?
I think I realized the reason I did get married was really just me thinking he was a good Muslim. And when I saw like in the home that wasn't the case, and that also kind of tied into character traits that I had no idea existed. It just made me feel like I was lied to, which again, a lot of stuff kind of just came out, and it was like, yeah, this isn't the person I thought I was marrying, like, at all.
Right.
And
you hadn't known him very long before you got married. So it does make sense that as time went on, you're learning more and more about them and seeing deeper into who they are as a person.
And you're sharing common space where like you didn't before you got married.
And I think I also like lost myself. So when I graduated high school, I definitely was like involved in a strict Muslim community and all that. But I was in college. I did have a good job, had my own money, was very independent. I had my own social circle. I was very well known on campus. I was a newspaper editor. Like, I was doing the thing, So even though I was like a reserved Muslim, I still had my life. But it's like when I got married, I lost all of that. And I just became someone's wife.
Right. Because you had to, because he wanted you to, because you felt like you needed to. What, like, why?
I feel like he made me think I should, But when I look back at it, I think it was just kind of like manipulation in a way of to make me think I'm doing the right thing as a Muslim wife, to only focus on being a Muslim wife when that's not the case. Like there are people who can do both. So it was really him wanting me to, but I didn't see it at that time. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Well, as women, we contain multitudes, and I feel like societally we're not allowed to. Or we feel like we're not allowed to, or the men around us make us feel like we're not allowed. Like there's all these factors kind of acting on you, right?
Yeah.
That don't help. And especially, I think, probably within a strict community with very like clearly defined roles and responsibilities, that's just another thing that's acting upon you and impacting how you like go about the world.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to me that the message you were getting is like, be patient, because, you know, and that makes sense. You didn't know them for very long. You're just getting to know them. Like, be patient. You'll learn each other's ins and outs. It's hard when you're first living with somebody. You have to learn the little things that they do and learn to kind of work together and find your groove. As someone who's married, I can say sometimes that takes a while. And sometimes my husband still does things that drive me crazy. Right. But there is a big learning curve. So I could see why people might be saying to you, oh, like, be patient, it will come. And you're also, I'm sure, feeling that pressure from like your religious community that I can't just up and leave.
But you know what, maybe it was also me because I don't think I was fully transparent about a lot. And I do think I hid a lot of things for years, honestly, not even just in the beginning. I hid a lot and I wasn't fully transparent. So maybe that was a factor as well. But I feel like it's because it was a lot of shame associated with it. It was like we're always in like that community. It's kind of like, don't ever say anything bad about your marriage ever. So how do I know if this is normal or if this is toxic? Like, how do I even figure that out if it's just like, keep everything silent, don't say anything, and just be patient, and that's it. So I think it's a difference between just being patient and just seeing stuff that is clearly just not normal and like goes against your values and your character, you know? And I think that's just the thing. And I also feel like if you've seen healthy marriages, you'll be able to know that.
Right.
Do you think your parents' marriage, like, did they, as far as you're concerned, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, do your parents have a healthy marriage from an outsider's perspective?
No. Well, they were not married, like, by the time that
you got married?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So no. So obviously no.
Yeah. So yeah. And then I would say, and the rest of my family, because I'm not really connected to my father's side, so I haven't really interacted with them much, but my mom's side is American, and I would say I never really saw marriages. It was just like long-term shacking up relationships, which again, I don't judge that, nothing wrong with that, but I just never saw like a long-term healthy marriage. That was long-term and healthy. So yeah,
that will impact what you think is.
So then how do you know as a married woman?
Yeah, and that's why I said I just didn't know, and I was just told, be patient. And then I also felt like in the beginning when I knew something was wrong, in a way, I also felt, I mean, I was probably being stubborn, but I was like, I don't want to prove my dad right, which was or I didn't want to prove other people, because I would say my mom's side of the family as well, they were pretty against it. So they thought I was like crazy, especially because like they're not Muslim, so they really didn't understand why would someone do this.
You're 18. Yeah. Especially the last thing you want to do is prove your parents and family right.
Yeah, I was very hard-headed, so I just didn't want that. But at the same time, I think I could have dealt with that shame. Like looking back at it, I don't think it would have been that terrible, but I refused.
I'm going to make it work. I'm going to prove them wrong.
Yeah, I can see that instinct. What were some of the differences in values and issues that kind of came up once you guys were married and living together that stood out as being like, okay, this feels problematic?
I would say the first thing I noticed was him kind of stripping me away from everything. That I would say that was the first red flag.
Yeah. So he didn't want you doing the newspaper at school anymore.
And I was involved in like everything as student government. Like literally, I was very known on campus. He didn't want me continuing school and purposely made it so that it was difficult. So he literally told me he didn't want me to work. So I quit my job. That was, again, I was only 18, but it was a decent job. It was for the DC government. I was just working in the library, but still, it was a
It's a
decent job.
government job. It
It
probably
was,
paid you well.
yeah, for that time, I was okay, And so I feel like he put me in a situation where it was like, you don't have to work. I'll take care of you. But then when it came to, okay, I want to continue school, oh, you have to figure that out. You have to figure out everything. How are you going to do books and get there and all that? Moved me somewhere where it was not public transportation because I grew up in the city. So I never really drove. I got around with the bus and walking. But then when we moved where we moved to, there was no transportation. So did not want to help with transportation. He just made that hard, which eventually I gave up on that. So I would say that was the first thing. And then after that, I would say just like constant making me feel like I was crazy for feeling however I felt.
Your feelings weren't valid.
Yeah. So I guess like gaslighting. And I would say like an example of that is kind of like I said, I had my own life before I met him, but eventually I lost all my friends too. So obviously it was just like, okay, I was expected to just be friends with his friends' wives. But a few times I said, I don't feel like connections to them. Like I'm not really getting along with them.
I don't feel like I'm part of the group.
Yeah. And he would literally say, well, I think it's you. And I'm like, no, I'm not the problem. I'm a nice person. I just don't feel the vibe with these people. Like I need my own life. For some reason, it was obviously me that was the problem. So
now, was his family in this church as well, or did he find it kind of come to it on his own like you did?
So no, his family's not Muslim. So he was a convert.
Okay.
So he converted pretty young.
I'm guessing you were living in more of a smaller community.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I guess outside of, like you said, there wasn't public transportation. So.
Oh yeah, it was like the suburbs. Driving is not far, but I didn't drive at the time because again, I grew up in the city. Like a lot of people in DC, if they grew up there, they don't get their license until like later on in life. So
until they grow up and move to the suburbs.
Yeah. So yeah, and I would say his family was pretty much like hands off with our marriage for the most part.
Okay, so they didn't have anything to do with it. But it's interesting that as you're describing it and then knowing what, whatever knowledge I have about kind of abusive relationships it's following that type of trajectory where you're being isolated from your friends. You're not going to work. You've been isolated from your school community. He's not saying you can't go to school, but he's made it impossible for you to go to school. And wants you to figure out your own transportation there, but also you don't work, so you don't have money to figure out your own transportation there.
Yeah.
Like I'm just putting that all together, right?
Was that just an agreement that you were going to do that, or did he already have a home, or it's just where you could afford to live?
It's like
he just decided to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like anything I needed was not a factor in anything. Yeah.
It was just what he wanted. Yeah.
Right. And so when you would share your frustrations with your friends in the community, I mean, depending on how you share it, I could see them being like, oh, well, this is married life and you just need to like get used to it and stuff, which is pretty messed up, I guess. But I don't even think it would be specifically within your community either. There's this idea that like you can't ever know what's going on in someone else's marriage, and I think that's true, but that you should need to like stay out of it. And so I'm like sitting here wondering like, how do you find that line, or like how do you I don't know how to navigate it. Really, because people don't really go deep with their marriage unless it's like really bad, and even then they probably don't.
Yeah, I think that was another factor. I don't think I felt like, so when I did get married, we were in his Muslim community. That's another thing. I wasn't with where I was before. And again, I just didn't gel well. Nothing was wrong with them. Like they're not bad people, but they weren't my type of people. And I feel like it was a very surface level connection I had with the people in that Muslim community. Very surface level, just hi, bye, how's everything, good. That's about it. So it wasn't, but so deep, I could really go with them. And then I lost all my friends because, I wasn't myself, which I do think, people should pay attention to that, when they do have friends that get into relationships or marriages. Like, are they isolating? It might not be because they don't want to be friends with you. It might be because they're just really in a toxic situation, but really no one knew. Like when I left, no one knew that my situation, was the way it was. But I would say there was one friend I made. Her brother's brother used to work with him a long time ago.
Okay.
And she was married as well. So at first when I met her, I was like, she's just going to be like one of these other women who I don't really get along with, but okay. But we actually became really, really close. And to this day, I say that me seeing her marriage and her family is what motivated me to, one, see what a healthy marriage and family structure look like, but also motivated me to realize something is not right here. And I'm grateful, for meeting her and her family.
What did you see in her family or in her marriage that you weren't seeing in your own?
So her and her husband, obviously, like they weren't as young as us, but they were still kind of young. I think she was like 18 and he was like 21, which again, that's still young. But I feel like, but at the same time, I feel like they just came from families that had a family structure and healthy marriages and were well connected. So I feel like getting married that young can still be, have issues. But I feel like when you have that support and you both have seen healthy environments, it's just different.
Well, you learn how to communicate in a healthy way if that's been modeled for you, which gives you a better chance.
Yeah. So I would say things like that. Like if there were issues, it was resolved in a healthy way. Like, and it would be times I'm like, oh, wow, like you guys don't argue every day. I thought that was normal. Like, or like certain things like he had done, I thought, this is normal. And I'm not saying she would just be like, oh no, leave that man. Like it wasn't necessarily like that, but it's just like over time, just certain things, it was just kind of like, I don't know if that's healthy, Kareema. And I'm like, I don't know either, but yeah, I would say they definitely just knew how to communicate efficiently. And he was supportive of her. I would say that was a big thing too, that support. Like I didn't receive that, but like he was supportive of her doing things she wanted to better herself. It was just overall, they both were benefiting from the marriage. It wasn't just one-sided.
So eventually, I guess you come to a realization that you no longer want to be in the marriage.
Yes.
I'm guessing it was you that ended it.
Yeah.
So, but before we get there,
Okay.
When did you have your child? You had your child in your marriage, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when did you have your child? Like, what was that like? Take us a little bit through, like, kind of, because those things in the beginning are not great, but you were being patient and kind of going with it. Like, did things get worse?
I think I was still in my first year of marriage when I got pregnant. But I think it was towards the end. I had my son early, so I had just hit the 7-month mark.
Oh, wow.
So I was barely out of 6 weeks. So, but my pregnancy was like really a disaster. It was, it was just, and I feel like throughout my pregnancy, I don't know. I know I said I knew in the first 6 months, but I feel like during my pregnancy, I really knew. Like I did not want to be here. But at the same time, I felt like, I should at least give my son a chance to experience having a father. So it was that guilt with it as well. But yeah, I feel like just in my pregnancy, we were moving around. And again, I wasn't considered, when you have a baby, things like, being close to family, other stuff like that is something that's very important to consider, but that just wasn't a factor. So
he probably, I would imagine, wanted you even further from family based on just how he was kind of trying to isolate you anyway, and knowing that a baby would bring family to you guys.
Yeah. So I eventually, yes, I was further. And I would just say throughout my pregnancy, I just wasn't supported, wasn't really, I was stressed. I had a lot of things like I was stressed about. The arguments just continued. Like that didn't change just because I was going through pregnancy. Then I was also sick majority of my pregnancy. I had a condition called preeclampsia, and I didn't know until later. So it was just really a lot. Then I ended up having to go into labor early. That's why I had my son early. So it was just a really bad experience. And then I also found out in that time I had an old friend. We didn't really hang out much, but he tried to get at her during my pregnancy.
Okay.
Charming.
Nice guy.
And I'm just like, out of all the people in the world,
this is someone I know and
care
friends
about,
with.
and yeah.
So yeah, I would say my pregnancy was just, it was not ideal.
You found this out while you were pregnant?
Yes, towards the end.
Okay.
Did you confront him?
I did.
Did he admit it? No.
And then I had proof, and he still, then in his mind, he was just justifying it. And I'm like, how do you justify this? But in his mind, he was able to justify it. But eventually, after the baby, I don't know if it was real, but I mean, he acted very remorseful and like he wanted it to be a new start. And I believed it. I was like, you know what? Maybe the baby is a new start. Like, you know, so that was what I thought at that time.
And it might have been genuine. He might have been like, oh, like, we've got a baby. I need to step it up and try to do a better job. Like, that may have been true. It didn't last, I'm guessing.
Well, especially if his family was kind of hands off anyway, it could read that some part of him wanted to do better by his own family.
I do think innately he wanted to be a good father. And I do think, as crazy as this sounds, I could see that he wanted to be a husband, but he just didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, I know that may sound like I'm being too compassionate about him, but I just do think he did want that. Like, I don't have a doubt in my mind, but I just think he never knew how. And I think he had a lot of issues he had to figure out with himself.
Well, I mean, and you guys were kids. You were kids having kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I just wasn't willing to stay and wait for him to figure it out, you know, like, so, but I definitely think he just had a lot of work he needed to do within himself, like a lot of issues. And it's like all of his insecurities were projected on me throughout our whole marriage. So I feel like, you know, that's something only he can resolve, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And how much longer until you actually separated?
And what was kind of like the tipping point where you were like, I got to get out?
Yeah. My son was, I think it was like around 1.5.
Okay.
Or like one and 7 months, something like that. 1 year and 7 months. It was, so I still was just like, I just, you know, was unhappy, very unsatisfied with my life overall. And I think eventually seeing my son as he grew up, I just felt like I don't want my son to think this is how you treat a woman. So I would say that was probably the biggest factor. And from that point, I just, you know, it was a long journey because I felt like, well, how am I going to take care of myself? I had nothing. I still didn't have a driver's license. I know that sounds crazy, but literally he never wanted to teach me how to drive, which is mind-boggling because like, that's crazy. But I didn't know how to drive. I didn't have a license. I didn't have anything. And I just felt like, how am I going to do this? Like, I can't do it. So I had a lot of feelings of self-doubt that it's no way I can do this. This is the life I chose. This is just what I'm going to be stuck in forever and ever to the end of time. Eventually, one day, I don't know what we argued over. I cannot remember, but it wasn't even something huge. But we had a 2-bedroom at that time, and it was like upstairs, downstairs. The upstairs, there was no heat at that time. He made me sleep upstairs where there was no heat and it was cold outside. It was like the fall, but it was really cold. So I was like freezing. And I don't remember why my brother came that day. I think it was just something like he was picking up something because I cooked a lot. No, back then. I think it was just something normal. He came by to pick up and he was like, "You're sleeping upstairs?" Because he saw like the comforter and pillows. He was like, "You're sleeping up here and it's like this cold?" And I was like, yeah, because in my mind, I'm like, I'm used to him doing stuff that just is mean to me. I would say, and then at that point, I still wasn't the motive for me. I still wasn't going to get up and go. But
Right.
when he told my father that, my father said, make her come to my house. There's no way she's staying there.
Right.
So I was forced, but I was happy I was forced because I still feel like I wouldn't have took that jump if my father wasn't really like serious about come here. Like he was just like, I don't care what you say, you and your son come here.
So you weren't resisting it too much,
I wasn't.
even though it was dad's idea.
I mean, I was scared. I was hesitant because
Yeah.
it was that factor of this is the same person who told me not to be in this marriage. So it was definitely
Right.
a pride thing for me. But at the same time, I was just like, this is crazy that I'm sitting out here sleeping in the cold.
Yes.
He thinks this is normal.
And your husband was sleeping in the room with heat.
Yes, him and my son were sleeping downstairs in the room with heat.
Yeah. And because he was mad at you, you had to sleep upstairs.
So was this kind of punishment par for the course in your marriage?
Yeah. I literally don't even remember what it was, but
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter, but that's punishing you.
yeah.
And in a healthy adult relationship, you don't punish the other person.
I think it's actually really amazing that your dad did that.
I do.
That you had that support, because that's also part of the reason often that a woman will stay in a relationship that is toxic or abusive, is that they don't feel like they have the family support. Like you said, you don't drive. Where are you going to go? You don't have a job. How are you going to pay rent? But then you have your dad who's like, hey, you need to leave. Come stay with me. I'll look after you or help you get your stuff back together. Like that eliminates some of those barriers that you had someone who was like, come and stay with me.
Yeah.
So you had a place to go. And
well, and I would imagine in his mind, he probably knew that you would likely not ask for help on your own. Of him especially, right?
Yeah. And overall, that's how I am. It's just as a person. Like I'm just very much, I mean, it's, I'm not saying it's a great quality, but people know that about me. I'm not going to ask. You have to literally drag me.
I feel you on that. I feel you on that.
Yeah.
Are you a Taurus?
I'm not. I'm a Capricorn.
Okay. Oh, okay. Earth signs, man. Like
I know. That's how we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I was definitely grateful that he was there for me, especially considering that he's the one who literally told me not to make that decision. And he didn't hold that over my head, every day. I mean, of course, like there was times where it's like, well, I told you. It's like, okay, but, of course, but I know I wouldn't be where I am in a lot of ways if he didn't help me at that point in time. Like because when I did go stay with him, he was in Virginia, which I never lived in Virginia before because I grew up mostly with my mother, and his home at the time was just better suitable for me and my son in terms of space and everything. So I went to a career development program in that area, and he supported me fully, like going there, like in terms of we figured out childcare in Virginia. We figured out, I didn't drive, so he helped me get my license, and he, made sure I finished that program that year and had no, issues really with that. So I feel like him really supporting me through that program is the reason why I, am where I am today.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
I love your dad. There's lots of dads who would not do any of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know your dad. I've never met him. I'm sure he has his flaws too, because we're all human and flawed. But
yeah,
I think it's really great that he did that and helped support you. What was your husband's response in all this?
Yeah, when your dad said to your brother, make her come here, did you just like go? And then what happened after that?
I don't know if I went that night.
But pretty shortly.
It was pretty shortly. It might have been the next day because I didn't really have that much stuff anyways, but
okay.
Yeah, but my husband's reaction, I think he thought I was just like being dramatic.
Okay.
Okay. Like I was just gonna be back at some point.
Like the next day or in a couple hours.
Or like in a week, a month, like whenever, like I would be back.
Okay. Okay. So he wasn't really taking it seriously. So he wasn't mad at you.
I mean, no, he definitely. I heard, oh, you're breaking the family apart, blah blah blah. But I think he thought I was just gonna be back.
Right.
Yeah. Deep down, he thought this is going to be short lived.
So
Yes.
when it came time, like when you were like, I want a divorce,
Hmm.
how did that go? Like, what kind of were there any like emotional ramifications from him, or like what did he do?
I would say in the beginning, he didn't want it to happen, and he even went so far as to like justify it and say like because he lived like so he actually worked at a bigger mosque at the time, and he was like a security guard there. He like ran a security program. He basically like made it known that the reason I wanted to leave was so that I could just go and be with other men.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile,
Mature.
he tried to be with other women when you were pregnant. Cool.
And so yeah, it was just like I think him being able to justify that to himself. I don't know if that is the only
Mhm.
way he was able to kind of cope with the divorce, but he literally like that was literally the rumor he had around that community. Um, and that's literally what he told me too. He was like, I know that's why you want to leave, and so whatever, blah blah blah. You want to break up a family just so you can be with other men, and I'm like, okay, that's not why. Maybe you're just
Mhm.
like not good to me. Is that? Do you not think that's a factor into why I don't want to be with you? But
Right. Right.
And did people believe him, or do you think people knew he was just blowing off steam?
I think people believed him because again, I was just known as his wife. Like the people in that community, they didn't know me as like me. I was just
Mhm.
his wife. So if they knew him better than me, I was just his wife.
Well, and I feel like in a lot of these really strict communities across any religion, based on the, again, little that I know, I'm not any kind of an expert, but
Yeah.
it's like they're very patriarchal,
Hmm.
right? There's no space for a woman to be a whole human. There's no space for
Yeah.
a woman to have wants and needs outside of what her man and her family.
Hmm.
And if she does, then it's like that. It's the classic Madonna whore complex that we have across like everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of, I don't know, society in general, probably a lot of religions, a lot of places, like a woman's identity when she's married is just that she's that person's wife,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
I mean, I've told this before in here. I go back to it often. Like, my late husband was very liberal, and we had a very egalitarian relationship as far as a lot of things go. But we worked together, and when we got engaged, oh, this is my fiance, and I'd be like, no, 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 like cool, but like we're at work, so I'm something else here.
Yeah.
I'm not just your fiance. So it's kind of
This is
pervasive.
Jennifer.
It's pervasive, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So you got out, you got a divorce, and then I mean, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that it wasn't the worst kind of being like exiled or cut off from the community because you weren't never really felt connected to the community that you married into.
It,
Did it affect like could you not go back to your other church like if you had wanted to? Could you like
yeah. So I feel like that was also the thing where it's like I was so far removed from the other mosque and my old
mosques, sorry.
friends, like they were also just in different phases of their life at that point where they had finished their degrees and they were in their careers or starting, and then maybe they were getting married, maybe they weren't, but either way, we were just in two completely different
Mhm.
stages. I was in survival mode with a baby, like none of them had babies. And so I feel like it was that aspect, but also like I said, like in a lot of these communities sometimes they're connected where like some people like it's the DMV is not that big, so like somebody knows somebody from a community. So I did feel very uncomfortable just overall just going to these communities. And there was one point because again I moved to Virginia with my father, but when I had eventually moved back to the area that I was in, Greenbelt, I remember running into this lady who knew us when I was married, and she had like she was just like, how are you? And I was like, I've been good, because she hadn't seen me in a while. And she had the nerve to like comment on, yeah, like it's not good for the baby. You need to get back. And I'm like, you don't even know what I've been going through.
You don't even know what's not good for the baby.
Yeah, that either. Like you don't know what's going on. Like you see me, I haven't been to the mosque here in so long. And the first thing you feel like you need to tell me is about you need to get back because it's not good for the baby. And he's gonna grow up and not gonna, be the best because of this. And I'm like, you literally don't like you don't we were never that close to begin with, but for you to not see me in so long and do that, I just was very turned off. And I would say it was a few people honestly that said things at that time. And there was one person, she apologized to me years later, but I'm just like, why do you even, I forgot you existed. Like, why are you apologizing to me? But it's like, I feel like people really need to think about the stuff they say when people are going through times like this, because if you can't relate, or if you don't have something positive to say or beneficial, then don't say it. Like, because at that time, things that I had heard from people in those communities really like hurt me and like put me down. But it's like, again, years later, it was like two people that like came back and apologized. And it's like, by then I wasn't even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
moved on.
Yeah.
But it does say something that they at least owned or were able to see, that unlike this other woman who was like, this is just bad for the baby,
Yeah.
right? Like, not that it impacts you, but people don't often admit when they're wrong.
Yeah, it is interesting that people reached out to apologize. Like, it makes you wonder what soul searching they've been doing of their
or
own
what has happened in their lives, and maybe
Yeah.
like what they're going through. I think it's really hard for us just to think outside of ourselves when it comes to dealing with other people, and just own that you don't know. Like, if the cashier at Walmart is shitty or whatever, like, okay, maybe your life's a little bit inconvenienced, but is it really that big of a deal that we need to get all angry and irate about? It's just like, you don't know what's going on in their world.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. And I think that's something like over time I had to learn to like not take everything as a direct reflection of me. Like sometimes what people go through really is a projection, and that's just life.
I'd say most of it is a projection, like the way somebody is responding to you.
Yeah.
Especially if it's negative, I would say. That's probably what it is 90% of the time.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, is that person staying in their marriage because they think it's best for the kids?
Probably.
And they're really actually miserable. They want you to be miserable too.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times that's what happens.
So where are you now with your relationship with your ex-husband?
So we try to co-parent. I will say, I feel like before COVID, we definitely had I wouldn't say about a co-parenting relationship, because we did argue a lot. But I will just say I feel like he was more hands-on with my son, because I do think he always wanted to be a father. I won't take that away from him. I think before COVID, he had more stability in his life, which a lot of people did. He had a townhome at that time. He had transportation, a decent job. So he was a more hands-on father. But after COVID, he basically lost everything. And he also moved in with his family, which was not a good influence on him and his, I don't know why, but him just being a father kind of decreased. And it's kind of been like that since COVID. I don't know if he'll be more hands-on like he was before. I will say we don't argue as much now. We do argue from time to time, but I feel like the reason we don't argue as much is because I have to be very like rigid with him, to where it's like strictly business. Don't talk to me about anything unless it's our child. Before, I feel like he was definitely trying to be in my business in terms of who I was dating, and and I feel like that was a lot of the issues. Before, it was definitely a lot of like judging me as well, because I was kind of coming out of that being a strict Muslim wife, where I wasn't covered anymore. And, and I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying at that time, that's what I chose to do. And I was wearing what I wanted to, and I was, going out and doing stuff so it was a lot of that judgmental factor. So we had a lot of arguments regarding that and him judging me and if I was dating people. But I would say now, I think he's just accepted this is who I am, this is who I'm
Right.
going to be. So I think, but he's also, now that he doesn't give me a lot of mouth on that stuff, I feel like he's also not as hands-on.
Right. He's
Yeah.
kind of like backed off in all the ways,
Yeah.
including the ones that relate directly to your son. What is your relationship with the Muslim community now?
I'm not like tied to anyone. Like if it's like a big holiday, I might like go to like some of the activities, but it would be more so like, you know, they have like kids stuff on like the big holidays. But I wouldn't say I'm like I'm not saying I'm completely opposed to it, but I'm definitely not like connected to one.
You're not attending weekly.
No. And even just like friendships, I would say like I have like a variety of friends. So it's like, I don't know. Like I'm not necessarily like tied to any community.
Right.
Are you
Right.
still friendly with that one woman the one person you connected with through the mosque you belonged to when you were married? Or did that kind of have to dissolve?
So we aren't friends anymore, but I still do keep in touch with her family.
Yeah. Did you ever reconnect with some of the friends that you had before you got married, like the friends you had from college?
Did, but again, I just feel like the dynamic wasn't the same. Like just our lives were just very different.
Yeah. I think it's hard when you have a child and your friends don't.
But not just that factor, but I think also like after my marriage, I really was like finding myself. And so I did like stop covering. Like when I say covering, I mean like I didn't wear the hijab anymore. And I did start doing stuff like that most Muslim girls didn't do, even if they were grown adults. So I think it was also that factor of like, I was figuring out myself in my career. I had a baby, so I was in survival mode, figuring that out. And I was also just navigating, you know, what type of Muslim am I? Like, am I someone who wants to be so strict, or do I want to be someone who more so keeps like the core values internally and just being a good person? So I feel like navigating that and just like living life and doing things I didn't experience before, I just think we were in a different phase where a lot of them, you know, again, they didn't have babies. They were already starting their career, finished college, but they were still practicing Muslims. So I feel like we just had different lives.
Well, they were allowed to kind of like go through that kind of self-discovery within the community, where I'm sure it felt to you like being a practicing Muslim is why you were where you were. So it, for me, reads that you'd want to experiment with going like way far outside of that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree.
If somebody was listening and is either in a really devout community and in a marriage that is celebrated by the community, but they're not sure if it's working for them, do you have any advice, or maybe for a friend who is maybe a friend to somebody who they suspect is you know, dealing with something similar?
I would say for people who are thinking about getting married in like a community, I would say really think about, where are you in your self-discovery journey? Like, do you really know who you are and what you want for your future? And the same for the person you're thinking about marrying. Like, do you think that that man is, you know, comfortable in where he is in life? And is he secure and confident in himself? Is he, you know, someone who supports you and someone who will be supportive of your wants and needs? And not just that, like, you know, religion can't be the only thing that ties you two together. Like, you guys have to really know each other as people first. Like, them being like a person that is like, you know, good Muslim, Christian, whatever, that's just like the cherry on top. But you really should be looking at like, can me and this person really go throughout life together? Out.
You have things in common.
Yeah, like, do we have the same values outside of, again, the religion? Like, what do we really value as people? Like, that's very important, because anyone can really look like a good, you know, religious person, but that doesn't really have anything to do with who they are.
Right.
So I think that's a factor. And also look at how they treat others. That's my biggest, and I would say my biggest thing is look at how men treat their families. how do they treat their friends? How do they treat people when you go out to eat? Like, are they rude? Like, all that stuff matters, because I feel like, of course, in the beginning, they're going to be nice to you, but how they treat others is how they really feel just overall about treatment towards people. So I would say that's a big thing I feel like people should pay attention to.
I just saw something the other day that reminded me of a conversation I'd had with another one of my mom friends, but it said, like, if a person is not nice to the waitress, server at a restaurant, they are not a nice person.
I agree.
Right? If they are not treating their family nicely, they are not a nice person. If the only person they're nice to is you, they might be manipulating you.
Well, yeah, like when a person shows you who they are, believe them. I think that's really it. And it doesn't just, they're not just showing you to you.
Yeah. And sometimes people, when they're trying to win over a partner, they only show their best side to them. I think sometimes women will feel special. Like, oh yeah, like he's an asshole to this person and this person, but he loves me. He's so nice to me. Like, I wish people saw him the way I saw him. But you have to think to yourself, like,
why don't they?
Good person?
Why don't they see him the way I do?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a major red flag with anybody that I've dated after him. Like, that's a major red flag for me. So I agree. And in terms of like advice to people who are in marriages that maybe they're like questioning, I feel like, you know, just really ask yourself, like, can I deal with this for 30 years? You know, that's like looking ahead of time. Do I feel like this person will support me in being who I want to be in 30 years or where I want to be in 30 years? And if you have kids, is this the type of dynamic I want them to think is normal? You know, so I would say that. And then in terms of like advice to like people who have friends who may be isolating themselves, I would say like check on them. And I know that sounds very generic, but I feel like really reaching out and making sure they're okay. And even if it feels like you're, you know, some people may feel like, oh, well, they're just, you know, in their own world with their, you know, new partner. But still, I would say just check on them, because you really don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
for sure. And I think be available and not judgmental, and don't assume you know what's happening.
Yeah. And don't take it personal, because I think sometimes people can feel like, oh, she got someone and now she just forgot about us. But you know.
Well, yeah, like when you were talking about, you know, yes, he was kind of forcing you to cut off from your friends, but your friends probably stopped checking in because you were 18, and they're probably like, oh, whatever, like she's got her man and she doesn't want anything to do with us. Like I had those thoughts when I was younger. And now as like an adult who has had that much more life experience, it can be more than that.
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of goes into what we were saying earlier, where like sometimes people's actions are not really a rejection of you, but more so them. So
Absolutely.
So true. What is dating like? Because you mentioned dating.
Yeah.
What is dating like as a single mom?
Yeah, I would say
in your 20s, when most people, like mid-20s, when most probably people that you're like looking to match with aren't in a position like you.
Yeah, I would say it's been different over the years. So when I was, again, like before COVID, I feel like my son's father was a lot more hands-on. So I feel like I was really able to, I had more time, you know, more free time, because we kind of had like a 60-40% ratio of time with our child. So I had a lot of free time. So I was able to just like, you know, see different people and figure out what I like, because I really did not know what I liked. Even before 2020, I didn't know. So I feel like because I had that time where he had his son more, I just was able to really date people and get to know them. But at the time, my purpose really was just to get to know them. Like I wasn't trying to lock anyone down, because I had a lot of things I needed to resolve within myself. So that was that. And I would say when our co-parenting dynamics kind of changed, I feel like that's when I was more rigid with my time that I spent with dating men, which also made me more selective. So I guess it was good that I had less kid-free time. So I feel like with that, I was just a lot more selective in, okay, what do I like? At that point, I'm not just dating just for fun. At that point, I'm really like, I mean, I am dating for fun, but I'm just like, what do I really like? What do I want to entertain or not entertain? So yeah.
The perception of what is fun about it changes, I think, over time when you have less time to commit to it. I mean, I have a rule that you have to show me that you're worth a babysitter.
Yeah.
It's like, if I have to pay a babysitter to have dinner with you, like, you need to be worth it.
Yeah.
Or make yourself available when my children are at school.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like when you have less time and you have to consider your kids, like, you are very much like, that person has to be worth it. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could be, spending this time that they're with a sitter or with their grandparents, going out with my girlfriends and just like enjoying myself versus some awkward first date conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say like the right person will be patient, because I am in a relationship now, and I would say like this is my first healthy relationship. I think like he's a really good guy, and I'm happy that I was patient for this, because I could have easily just rushed into a relationship afterwards, but I really took that time to like heal and learn what do I like and date and enjoy myself. But I will say with him, I feel like he has from the beginning been patient with, like, he even knew my co-parenting schedule. He would be like, okay, so we can do this weekend because his dad's gonna have him. So I feel like that person, it'll just work out,
Right. Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like that. And I'm glad that you found somebody who is treating you the way you deserve to be treated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. I'm grateful. And again, I'm like grateful that I was like patient. Like, I feel like that's what I'm like most proud of. Like, because I feel like so many people rush into things after these type of messy situations, but I feel like you really need that time. So
yeah. A lot of people they're used to being in a relationship, so then they rush into finding someone else to attach themselves to and fill that kind of void.
Yeah.
But as you said, you had your own healing to do, your own self-discovery to do, and that really sets you up to be in a better position to then meet somebody and have a healthy relationship.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kareema, for taking the time to chat with us today.
No problem.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm happy you guys, brought me here.
Thanks for listening to the Now What Pod. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review. Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it. You can find us on social media at The Now What Pod. Until next time, we're Tisha and Jen. Remember, your story matters and you do too.